I am Bianca, 32 years old. That night, right in the middle of the wide, gleaming living room, in front of more than 40 guests, my mother slapped me so hard my whole body reeled. The sharp crack cut through the cheerful chatter around us. I staggered, my vision blurring as if 1,000 shards of light burst apart. And then what left me truly paralyzed was not the burning pain on my cheek, but the sight of Ethan, my brother, slowly clapping. Each clap felt like a cold blade striking deeper into my chest. He even let out a half-laugh, half-sneer. "You truly deserved it, Bianca." My father leaned back in his leather chair, legs crossed, sipping red wine like he was watching a comedy show. Tilting his head, lips curled into a smirk, he spoke words that still echo in my ears. "You brought this on yourself." No one defended me. Not a single hand reached out to stop it. The people I once called family just sat there, eyes cold, as if they were watching my dignity stripped away. I stood frozen beneath the crystal lights, every gaze fixed on the red mark across my cheek. My breath caught in my throat. I fought to keep from trembling, but inside I was breaking. In that moment I realized something bitter. I had never truly had a family. I was just a shadow, a mirror reflecting what they despised in themselves. They saw in me what they couldn't face in their own hearts, and the only way to feel at ease was to humiliate me. The air grew thick, heavy, as if everyone silently agreed that I should endure in silence. I heard chairs scrape, glasses clink, mocking chuckles. Someone even muttered casually, "Come on, it was just a slap." Just a slap. I clenched my teeth to keep from crying out. Yes, to them it was nothing. But to me it was the final blow. Proof that they would never see me as a person worthy of respect. I pressed my hand to my cheek, the searing heat spreading to my temples. In that instant I no longer felt small or pitiful. I saw clearly they never loved me. I was nothing but a target for their contempt. Ethan shot me a triumphant glance. My mother sat back down, her icy eyes never leaving me. My father leaned further into his chair, sipping again as though none of this concerned him. I knew that if I spoke up they would laugh in my face, accuse me of overreacting. If I ran they would sneer. "See? Always so weak." But for the first time in my life, amid the swirl of humiliation, my mind grew strangely calm. I no longer wanted to argue, nor hear apologies, nor prove myself. I simply realized I was never the problem. I was the mirror that exposed their deceit, greed, and cruelty. And for that they hated me. I took a deep breath, swallowing back the rising sob. The room still rang with chatter, glasses clinking as if no slap had ever landed. Only I stood there, heart hardening piece by piece. That night, when I stepped out of that house glowing with lights but colder than the winter night outside, I knew everything had changed. They thought they had broken me beyond repair. But little did they know, that very moment was when I awakened. I no longer craved their affection. I no longer clung to a rotten home. That night, I swore I would never let them hold my fate again. As I walked into the cold night, leaving that house behind, memories surged back like a film in reverse. My mother's slap had not begun that day. It was the result of years of lies, manipulation, and honeyed words masking venom. My family had long valued money and reputation above any bond of blood. My father, Charles, was a real estate mogul in his 60s, praised in the community for building an empire from nothing. But to me, he was just a man who used the name of family to hide his shady deals. He could smile with clients, raise his glass at lavish parties, but at home he was a cold judge, always ready to condemn me for not following his script. My mother, Eleanor, was different. She didn't scream or scold, but she knew how to twist stories so others believed I was ungrateful, arrogant, impossible to handle. She would often tell neighbors and relatives, "Bianca always thinks she's smarter than everyone. She doesn't appreciate a thing." Those words were like thin blades, not killing me outright but slicing until everyone doubted me. What I remember most was how they excluded me from every important decision. In college, when I received a full scholarship in New York instead of Pride, my mother just said, "Good, but don't think a few degrees make you better than your siblings." My brother Ethan was handed control of one of my father's companies, though he had never shown an ounce of responsibility. As for me, whenever I offered an idea, I was brushed aside. What would a girl know about business? But the cruelest wound came with the inheritance. My grandparents had left a large fund, clearly stating it was to be shared equally among all grandchildren. Yet when I asked, my parents gave me a doctored copy of the documents. My name had been pushed down to dependent member, not involved in management. I was just 24 then, too naive to realize they had built an entire wall of deceit. I will never forget that night when I accidentally overheard my father and mother talking in the study. "Don't let Bianca touch it. She's too stubborn, never listens. Put it under Madeline's name and Ethan will run it. As for her, pretend she doesn't exist." I stood frozen outside the door. At that moment I still thought maybe I had misheard. But as time went on, the truth became clearer. Madeline, my older sister, was always clever, always knew how to win over our parents. On the surface she acted gentle, caring toward me, but in reality she was the right hand in their plan to erase me. She was the one who sent me the reunion invitation, a few months ago. A card with elaborate decorations, elegant handwriting as if filled with sincerity. I hesitated for a long time before deciding to attend. And now I understand it was only a trap. They called it a warm family dinner, but it was nothing more than a show. A performance where I played the traitor so they could humiliate me and secure their standing. I still remember last year when Madeline launched her luxury fashion brand, I refused to invest. I knew clearly it was just a delusional project. Money flowing from the family fund while debts piled onto the foolish. That very day she screamed in my face, "You think you're so great, Bianca? Without us, you're nothing." From that day they cut off all contact. 6 months with no messages, no calls. Until the card arrived. I had been naive enough to think maybe this was a chance to mend things, that after all that time they wanted to apologize. But the truth was far harsher. Tonight, when my mother slapped me in front of dozens of people, when Ethan clapped gleefully, when my father smirked, and when Madeline only gave a cold smile, I realized it had all been arranged. They wanted to turn me into the villain, right in the house once called a home. They wanted everyone to believe Bianca was the ungrateful, arrogant child, unworthy of the Williams name. I knew for a long time they had already written my role. And I had played it too well. The only difference was that tonight I would no longer stand still on their stage. I walked out into the night, my hand clutching a small purse. Inside, the invitation card was still there, a reminder. This was never a reunion, it was a verdict. But they didn't know that I had begun preparing a different performance for myself. A performance without their script. And when the curtain falls, the last person to bow will most certainly not be me. The dining room glowed with chandelier light, each beam refracting through crystal glasses, making the whole room shimmer like a stage. I sat in a solitary chair, set apart from the main table, quietly observing. The other seats were filled with my parents' friends and business partners, faces painted and covered with perfect smiles. Dinner was loud, the conversations circling around contracts, Ethan's promotion, or the upcoming event Madeline was hosting. Not a single word touched me. I was like a shadow deliberately ignored. Just as dessert was being served, my mother, Eleanor, slowly rose to her feet. She lifted a glass of red wine, the liquid shimmering, and tapped a silver spoon against the rim. The ting rang out, enough to silence every other sound. More than 50 pairs of eyes turned to her. My mother wore the perfect smile, the kind only those who lived with her would know was the most dangerous. She swept her gaze across the room, her clear voice ringing out. "Before we end this evening, I want to share a few thoughts about my family. Because to me, the greatest value has always been tradition and gratitude." Everyone tilted their heads to listen, as though she were about to give a heartfelt speech. But only I knew that speech had been written with me as its target. "In every family," she continued, "there are times when certain members forget where they came from. They mistake their small personal successes as permission to scorn their roots. They forget that without the sacrifices of family, they would have nothing." Her words poured into the guests' ears like wisdom, but each syllable stabbed into me like a knife. I noticed a few people glance at me, then nod quietly. She paused briefly, then went on, her voice sweet but icy. "Money cannot buy loyalty. And arrogance has never made anyone great. Some children forget this, and as a result..." She let the words hang, sipping her wine, leaving the entire room to finish the sentence for her. A chuckle rang out from the far end of the table. Ethan, my brother, couldn't help but clap. 3 deliberate claps, punctuated like applause for his mother's performance. He even added loudly enough for all to hear, "Well said, mother. I couldn't have put it better myself." The whole room broke into laughter. Harsh, forced, but unanimous. I sat still, my hands clenched beneath the table, nails digging into my skin. My father, Charles, merely leaned back, raised his glass, lips curling into a mocking smile. He didn't need words. That cold gaze alone told me he agreed with it all. I drew in a breath, then laid my napkin on the plate. I had endured enough. I rose, intending to leave quietly without another scene. I no longer wished to be the puppet in this farce. But just as I turned, a sharp, cracking sound echoed through the room. My cheek burned. My mother stood right there, her hand still raised, her fingers trembling slightly, but her eyes filled with satisfaction. The room went silent. The clatter of silverware stopped, the whispers died away. A few guests covered their mouths, others looked aside to avoid the awkwardness. The glass in my hand slipped and shattered on the marble floor. Shards of crystal scattered, catching the light and glittering like shards of ice. Then my father's voice rang out, indifferent, without the slightest tremor. "You brought this on yourself." I turned to each familiar face but only found strangers. Ethan folded his arms, the corner of his mouth curled. Madeline kept swirling her wine glass as if nothing had happened. No one moved toward me. Not a single person stood by my side. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned, walking straight down the long hallway lined with family portraits, where I had been erased from the frames years ago. Each footstep echoed on the wooden floor, carving deeper into the truth. I never belonged here. Outside, the winter wind struck my face, freezing cold but sharpening my mind. My cheeks still burned, but that sting reminded me this was all real. No one followed. No one called my name. The door closed behind me, shutting off the golden glow inside, leaving me with the night and silence. In that silence I knew, they thought tonight was the night I would break. But no. This was only the beginning. That night I returned to my small apartment in Brooklyn. Beyond the window, city lights cast a pale yellow glow on rain-streaked sidewalks. My cheeks still burned, but the pain made me sharper than ever. I brewed a cup of ginger tea and sat at the wooden table by the window. In front of me lay my phone, screen black, reflecting back my hardened face. The room was still, only the ticking clock sounding steady, as if counting down to the moment I would end it all. I knew, if I stayed silent, I would forever be the pawn erased from the board. But if I acted, I would not only rise for myself, I would expose the secrets they had buried for years. I drew a deep breath and opened my contacts. 3 names appeared, waiting there for 2 years, only needing me to finally press call. The first call, Dorian Lawyer. I dialed. 3 rings before a calm male voice answered, "Bianca. I guess it's finally time." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Yes. Activate the plan. I want the Williams family trust frozen immediately. On the other end, I heard papers flipping, keys tapping. Dorian didn't ask why. He had known the answer all along. "We still hold the power of attorney your mother signed 3 years ago, correct?" I checked, she never revoked it. And Charles was too confident to double-check. I nodded as if he stood before me. "That's it. Use it. No media alerts. Everything stays silent until morning." Dorian answered shortly, "Understood. By sunrise they won't be able to move a single dollar. I'll send confirmation before 8 a.m. The call ended, leaving a cold certainty in my chest. I had just cut off their first breath. The second call, Miranda, financial expert. I turned back to the screen, my hand trembling slightly but resolute. Miranda's number lit up. She picked up after a short ring, her voice still heavy with sleep. "Bianca? It's late, what's so urgent?" I opened my laptop, dragging the folder for when they crossed the line, to the center of the screen. Dozens of files appeared. Photos of ledgers, receipts, records. "Miranda, I just sent them to your secure inbox. Photos I took from my father's study tonight. Handwritten invoices, checks, even the charity fund account sheets." I paused, my voice dropping lower. "They siphoned money from the community fund into Ethan's bankrupt company, then funneled more into Madeline's fashion brand. I want you to trace the flow immediately." Silence for a few seconds on the other end, then the rapid tapping of keys. Miranda spoke quickly, firmly. "If those photos are real, this isn't a minor violation. This is large-scale embezzlement. I'll match the bank data, build a comparison of withdrawals and deposits. By morning, you'll have a full report. I nodded faintly, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you, Miranda. I don't want this treated as some family quarrel. I want the truth to speak. Her voice replied firm. You'll have it. Trust me. The third call, Rowan, legal contact. Finally, I dialed Rowan's number. After just one ring, he picked up, his tone blunt. I hope this is worth it, Bianca. It is. I just sent you the charity fund's registration code and a Dropbox link. Inside are all the records I've archived for 2 years. Transactions, receipts, even copies of confidential files from my father's office. I heard papers rustling, then a faint breath. Rowan lowered his voice. If this is real, I can file for a subpoena within 48 hours. They won't have time to hide anything. Do it, I said without hesitation. No comfort, no wasted words. Only the cold agreement between two people who knew the game had turned. When the 3 calls ended, I sat motionless by the window. The city outside still blazed with light, but inside me was a different stillness. I didn't feel excited nor afraid. Only determination surged through every vein. My family always thought I was weak, only capable of silent endurance. But they forgot. In my silence, I had been quietly gathering every piece of evidence, every trace they dismissed. That night I didn't scream, didn't cry. I only whispered to myself, from now on I control this game. And I knew when dawn broke their world would begin to collapse. I thought I had prepared myself for every form of resistance from my family, but nothing could stop the chill that ran through me when my phone rang the next evening. An unknown number appeared and I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. On the other end, a low, husky yet familiar female voice said, Bianca, do you still remember Aunt Catherine? I nearly dropped the cup in my hand. Aunt Catherine, my father's sister. The only one who ever dared to openly criticize Charles about the way he ran the fund. She had died 8 years ago, her death recorded as a sudden stroke. But from that day on, her name was erased from every family story as if she had never existed. I swallowed hard, answering softly, I remember. Who is this? I'm Margaret, your aunt's old friend. Before she died, she asked me to keep something. She said to give it back only if one day you needed the truth. I froze. In Margaret's trembling voice, I sensed urgency. She arranged to meet me at the Bergen County Archives, 3rd floor, Old Records Room, the next morning. That morning, I drove to the gray stone building tucked in the middle of downtown. The old brick walls and the musty smell of paper made me shiver. The records room was nearly empty, lit only by the pale yellow glow of flickering fluorescent lights. Margaret stood waiting at the end of a row of wooden shelves. She looked thinner, her hair tied back, streaked with silver. When she saw me, she nodded gently, then pulled a thick envelope from her coat pocket, pressing it firmly into my hand. Everything is in here. A recording Catherine left behind. Your aunt knew the truth would one day come out. Be careful because this will change everything. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a plain black USB drive, unmarked. I looked up at her and she only said, listen to it somewhere safe. And never let them know I gave it to you. That night, in my small apartment, I shut off the Wi-Fi and disabled Bluetooth. I plugged the USB into my old laptop, my heart pounding. A single file appeared. 2012_April_Catherine_audio. I pressed play. Static crackled, then a trembling female voice. This is Catherine. I hope if you're hearing this, it means you're strong enough to face it. Then came my father's voice, Charles. Clear, steady, without a hint of hesitation. We'll establish a new fund, put Bianca's name on it as cover. She's naive, she'll never ask questions. With everything under her name, even if the IRS investigates, they'll find nothing. I froze. Another voice cut in, my mother, Eleanor, sweet but venomous. Exactly. She thinks she's being ignored, but in truth, the less she's involved, the better shield she becomes. Later, if anyone questions us, we'll just blame it on her instability. Then Ethan's voice, laughing harshly, perfect. Let her be the legal puppet. The money still flows straight into our pockets. I couldn't believe my ears. My whole body went cold. Aunt Catherine's voice interrupted in the recording. You're turning her into bait. You're committing crimes. My father sneered. No, we just know how to use the situation. And if you keep talking, you know exactly what will happen. The static buzzed, then the file ended. I collapsed onto the table, my hands covering my face. For years, I thought I had only been cast aside, dismissed. But the truth was crueler. I had never been ignored. I had been turned into the legal tool for their fraud. I opened the drawer and pulled out the stack of old papers I had secretly copied during the times I came back to care for my mother after her surgery. Black ink on white paper, my signature appeared at the bottom of those trust fund contracts. But I had never signed them. The forged handwriting was clumsy, yet stamped with a notary seal. I examined the seal closely and saw a name, Notary J. Holmes, 2012. That person had long since retired. My chest tightened. My parents had forged my signature to move millions of dollars through secret accounts. I wasn't just an outsider. I was the living shield for their entire scheme. In that moment, shame hardened into cold fury. They thought I was too weak to fight back, that I would forever be their blind pawn. But this time I had evidence, I had the truth. And the truth cut sharper than any words. I closed the laptop, clutching the USB in my hand. Outside, the city still blazed with light. But inside me, a fire had ignited. The fire of someone with nothing left to lose, only the path of dragging every lie into the light. The court date arrived faster than I imagined. That morning, New York's sky was heavy gray, low clouds hanging like a storm was about to break. I wore a simple black suit, holding the thick file I had spent countless nights preparing. Entering the federal courthouse, the click of my heels echoed on the marble floor, each step a declaration. I would not back down. Inside the courtroom, my parents were already seated on the opposite bench. Charles wore a dark gray suit, a bright red tie like a warning flag. He sat upright, arrogance still radiating in his eyes. My mother, Eleanor, dressed in a pearl cream gown, face frozen, refusing to glance at me. Ethan sat beside them, chin lifted, arms crossed as if the entire room were his stage. Madeline kept her head down, unease flickering in her eyes. Beside them was Carlton, the family's attorney, known for his charm and sharp tongue. He adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses, flashing me a polite smile, though his eyes cut like blades. The judge entered. The room rose, then settled as she sat. A woman in her 60s, silver hair neatly tied back, her face stern, her eyes piercing through lies. Carlton stood first, voice steady. Your Honor, we request that the freeze on the Williams Fund be lifted. The defendant, Bianca, acted out of personal emotion and family resentment, not on any legal grounds. This fund has sustained generations. To freeze it over such baseless accusations would cause irreparable harm. He paused, turning toward me, stressing each word. She has a history of psychological instability since adolescence. Her recent actions are clearly retaliatory, not in pursuit of justice. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. I clenched my fists, but Dorian, my attorney, gave me a calm nod to hold steady. The judge turned to us. Attorney Dorian, your response? Dorian rose slowly, placing the thick file on the table. Your Honor, we present two key pieces of evidence. First, these are copies of legal documents where Ms. Bianca's signature was forged to authorize financial transactions. Her authentic signature in notarized records is entirely different. He handed the papers to the court clerk. The projector displayed two columns. My real signature on a driver's license and old contracts, versus the forged ones on fund documents. The difference was undeniable, stirring murmurs across the room. Dorian continued, voice firm. Second, here is an audio recording. In it, Mr. Charles Williams, along with his wife and son, discussed creating a fraudulent trust, using Bianca's name as a shield to evade tax authorities. Please let the court hear it. The audio filled the courtroom, my father's cold, steady voice. We'll establish a new fund, put Bianca's name on it. She'll never suspect a thing. Everything looks clean on paper. Then my mother's voice, sweet but calculating. If there's ever an issue, just say she's unstable, not trustworthy. Finally, Ethan's mocking laugh. Perfect. She'll be our legal puppet. The air in the courtroom froze. I sat tall, eyes forward. This was the truth they could not deny. The judge remained silent for a long moment, then turned to my father. Mr. Charles Williams, is that your voice? My father shifted, trying to keep his composure. but his voice came out hoarse. It could have been altered. I won't confirm. Answer yes or no, the judge cut in. Pause. Then at last he forced the word out. Yes. The only sound left was the judge's pen tapping against the bench. She looked up, voice ringing clear. The motion to lift the freeze is denied. The Williams Fund will remain frozen until further notice. Furthermore, the case will be referred to federal authorities for investigation into financial fraud, falsification of documents, and forgery. The sound of the gavel echoed, reverberating through every corner of the room. I took a deep breath, feeling as though a heavy weight on my chest had been lifted. Across from me, my father's face turned pale, his hands clenched so tightly the veins bulged. Eleanor lowered her head, her face ashen. Ethan slammed his hand on the table in frustration, while Madeline sat silently, her eyes red. I stood gathering my files. As I walked past, I heard my father's low, venomous voice behind me. You think you've won, don't you? I stopped, turned my head and looked him straight in the eye. No, father. This is only the beginning. And I stepped out of the courtroom, the bright light in the hallway opening like the first page of a new chapter. 2 weeks after the hearing, the morning at the Williams estate began as usual. The iron gates swung open, a maid carried in the paper and milk, the clinking of glasses echoed inside. But within minutes, that calm scene was shattered. 7 black cars with federal emblems turned onto the gravel drive. A line of IRS officers and federal agents in navy jackets stepped out, moving in formation, search warrants in hand. The pounding on the door was relentless, followed by the shrill of the doorbell, leaving no chance for anyone inside to escape. Ethan was the first to answer. He was still in a sleep shirt, his hair messy, eyes bleary. When the gold badge was raised in front of him, the blood drained from his face. We have a warrant to search the entire Williams property. Step aside, a female agent said, her voice steady and firm. Ethan stammered, No, this can't be. My mother will. The door was pushed open, the line of agents entered. My mother, Eleanor, came down the stairs in a silk robe, her face drained of color. She stammered, What is this? What are you doing in my house? The agent held up the warrant. This is a federal investigation into financial fraud and embezzlement. Please cooperate. I wasn't there, but I learned what happened from many sources. The maid, the old driver, and the photo Dorian sent me. My father, Charles, stormed out of the library, shouting in rage, demanding the lawyer be called immediately. But Carlton, the attorney, was powerless, sitting in the living room as agents pulled open drawers, seized hard drives, and sealed entire folders of documents. In Ethan's office, they uncovered a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside was no gold or jewels, but a worn black leather ledger bound tightly with straps. When opened, page after page revealed scrawled notes, dates, account numbers, amounts transferred. Alongside them were codes, M89, 87, B91, our birth years, mine, Ethan's, and Madeline's. The agents documented, photographed, then sealed the ledger. Ethan screamed, trying to snatch it back, but was restrained. Charles stood frozen, his hands trembling. Eleanor collapsed onto a chair, breathing heavily in disbelief. The news spread quickly. By noon, local media had posted photos of boxes of files and equipment being carried out of the mansion. The name Williams was no longer paired with prestigious, but with the phrase federal investigation. That evening, my apartment doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw Madeline. She wore a heavy coat, her hair disheveled, her eyes red as if she had cried for hours. In her hand, she clutched a handbag, her fingers trembling. Bianca, I need to talk, she rasped. I paused, then stepped aside to let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the dim yellow light above us a stark contrast to the grandeur of our past encounters in the mansion. Madeline kept her head bowed, her hand gripping the edge of her bag. Then suddenly she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Bianca. I believed them. I thought you were the traitor. I stood on their side, but it was all lies. I stayed silent, letting her continue. When I saw the agents pull out that ledger, I understood. All these years they didn't just manipulate you. I was nothing but a pawn too. I thought I was the heir, but I was just another tool in their game. She choked back tears, gripping my hand tightly. If they need testimony, I'll cooperate. I'll testify, tell everything I heard, everything I saw. You're not alone anymore. I looked into her tear-filled eyes. For years, Madeline had chosen my parents' side, had laughed when I was humiliated. But in this moment I saw no deceit in her gaze. Only a broken woman desperate to escape the darkness. I nodded slightly, my voice calm. If you truly want out, this is the only chance. There's no turning back, Madeline. She nodded firmly, as if afraid I might not believe her. I know. And I'll sign whatever papers are needed. The room fell silent, only the ticking of the clock remained. I poured her a glass of water. She held it, both hands trembling. For the first time in years, I felt that my sister and I might finally stand on the same side. That night, when Madeline left, I stood by the window watching the trail of car lights stretching along the avenue. The storm had begun. My parents and Ethan were crumbling under the eyes of the media and the law. And I, for the first time in years, had an ally within my own family. But I also knew, this was not the end. Because with people like Charles and Eleanor, when power and wealth slip from their hands, they do not surrender easily. And I had to prepare for their final strike. 3 days after the raid, while the press was still flooded with news about the Williams family, I returned to my apartment after a long day of work. In the mailbox by the door, there was a thick cream-colored envelope, the corner marked by a shaky yet familiar handwriting. I froze. That handwriting. I had seen it hundreds of times in my childhood. My grandfather's signature. Benjamin Doyle. The gentleman who always sat on the porch in Vermont, pipe in hand, telling me stories of the past. He had been gone nearly 10 years, yet the faint scent of pine from the envelope seemed to carry me back to those summers. I stepped inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small silver USB drive. My heart pounded in my chest. I opened the letter first. The lines were uneven but carried immense weight. Bianca, if you are reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. I saw the way your father, Charles, and your mother twisted every rule. I warned, but then I stayed silent, because I was weak. The only thing I could do was prepare for the day you discovered the truth. I bit my lip, my eyes blurring. I never allowed Charles or Eleanor to control the entire estate. I created a separate trust in Vermont, along with the cabin where we once sat by the fireplace. All the legal documents have been sealed. And the heir is not them, it is you. I dropped the letter, both hands shaking. Not because of the value of the inheritance, but because my grandfather had seen it all long ago, and quietly shielded me. I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen stayed black for a moment, then a video appeared. My grandfather sat in his old armchair, wearing a gray sweater, the firelight flickering on his face. Time had etched deep lines, yet his eyes were still warm. If you're watching this, Bianca, then they've done what I feared. I know you were belittled, cast aside. But I always believed you were the only one who kept her integrity. His voice was deep, slightly shaky but firm. Everything I built in Vermont, the land, the scholarship fund, even the cabin by the lake, belongs to you. Not because you are my granddaughter, but because you never let greed control you. You saw people for who they were, yet you chose kindness. That is true strength. He paused, then leaned closer, staring into the camera. Don't waste your life on revenge, Bianca. Anger only burns the heart. Build something stronger than anger. You can. I believe in you. The screen went dark. I sat frozen, tears streaming as my lips pressed tightly shut. Everything inside me twisted. Pain, relief, and the sense of being handed a torch. I pulled another document from the envelope. A clear seal read, Trustee Transfer Vermont 2015. The designated heir, Bianca Doyle Williams. My hand trembled as it touched my own name. After years of being reduced to a shadow, mocked as an outsider, the truth was here. My grandfather had never abandoned me. Outside the window, snow began to fall, white flakes blanketing the city. I sat still, the letter in my hand, the USB glowing in my laptop. Tomorrow, I knew my parents would try everything to overturn it. Charles would never accept that the largest inheritance belonged to the daughter he always scorned. But this time it was out of his control. And for the first time in years, my heart held more than resentment. I saw another path unfolding, the one my grandfather wanted for me. Not building an empire on lies, but creating something good, something meaningful. I whispered softly, as if speaking to him, I promise. I won't let your legacy be just numbers. I will turn it into a refuge for those cast out by their own families, just as I once was. The snow outside glowed brighter, reflecting in my eyes a new resolve. The final trial lasted nearly 4 hours. Attorney Dorian pressed forward, piece by piece. The forged signatures, the black ledger, even the recording left by Aunt Catherine. On the other side, Carlton tried to spin the narrative, but the more he argued, the more the cracks showed. When the judge read the verdict, the courtroom fell utterly silent. The Williams Trust is hereby declared unlawful, fraudulent, and null in its entirety. The case will be referred to federal authorities for criminal investigation into Charles Williams, Eleanor Williams, and Ethan Williams. The gavel struck. In that moment, I sat upright, my hands gripping the edge of the table. I did not cheer, I did not smile. Only a quiet peace spread through me, as if an old door had finally closed. Across from me, my father lowered his head, deep wrinkles carved into his stiffened face. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears streaming down, but I knew they were not from regret, only from her inability to endure having the truth laid bare. Ethan slammed his fist onto the table, his eyes blazing red with fury, like a man who had just lost everything. Only Madeline sat quietly, her eyes swollen with tears, never once looking away from me. 1 month later, when things had begun to settle, I went up to Vermont. The wooden cabin by the lake that my grandfather left me remained untouched, just as in my memories. Neatly stacked logs by the porch, the old oil lamp hanging by the window, and the faint scent of pine drifting in the air. I stood for a long time, running my hand gently along the wooden wall, feeling as though he were still there somewhere, watching me with a smile. I decided to make this place the foundation of a small organization. I named it the Vermont Lantern, a fund to support women abandoned by their families or entangled in legal troubles, just as I once was. We began modestly. A few free legal counseling sessions, a few small scholarships for young women seeking to escape toxic environments. But each time I saw the gratitude in their eyes, I understood that my grandfather had been right. Strength was not in revenge but in creating something that lasted beyond anger. Madeline also appeared, no longer draped in expensive dresses, no longer wearing her false social smile. She would often come quietly, helping me sort papers, balance accounts, sometimes simply standing in the kitchen cooking dinner for the volunteers. Neither of us brought up the past, but the distance between us slowly healed through simple acts. Once, while I was arranging flowers in the cabin's living room, she came over and said hesitantly, "You know, when I was little, I used to dream of having a safe place, somewhere I could run to if things ever went wrong. I think Vermont is that place thanks to you." I only smiled without answering. Because sometimes, forgiveness does not need to be spoken aloud. News about the Williams family was quickly consumed by the media and then faded away. My parents and Ethan faced investigations, their assets frozen. In the public's eyes, they were no longer symbols of success, but proof of how greed leads to downfall. As for me, I chose silence. No public statements, no interviews. I knew that sometimes silence resounds louder than any speech. Each afternoon, as I sat on the cabin porch watching the lake shimmer under the sunset, I thought about the story that had passed. I never saw myself as a victor. I only saw a woman who had walked from darkness into light, and who chose in the end to stand tall. I closed my first journal with a sentence I knew would stay with me forever. I did not break the family. I only stopped letting them break me. In real life, Bianca's story is not only a family tragedy but also a reminder of the inner strength of a woman who dared to face the truth. Though betrayed and humiliated by her own relatives, she chose the path of justice and compassion over blind revenge. From the shadows of manipulation, Bianca rose to build a refuge for women who once felt as hopeless as she did. Her story concludes with a truth: family may wound us, but only we decide whether to fall or to stand firm. What do you think about Bianca's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories and profound lessons about family life.